has provided a clear framework for action with concrete benchmarks across all areas of human rights, development, rights, and I've met some of those who participate, some of the young people who participate in this network. We also support young people with concrete tools that can assist them to stand up for their rights and engage with the United Nations. It's clear that youth engagement, and I've mentioned it on other occasions, will be central to our own Human Rights 75 initiative on the occasion of the various anniversaries that we have this year. A youth advisory group will help to guide us through all the activities and ensure that we take young people's needs and recommendations on board throughout the year and beyond. It is important to remember that those needs and recommendations will be diverse as young people themselves. We need to engage with young people of every ethnicity and from every income and educational background, of every political opinion, sexual orientation, or other distinction. Despite all our progress, some institutions continue to engage with young people in a superficial, sometimes almost tokenistic way. They may have formal structures that acknowledge the importance of young people's views, but they are unlikely to seek out voices that are diverse or unfamiliar, and even less likely to act on what they say. And more broadly, even though overall young people have never been more acted, they continue to face significant obstacles to achieving their full potential, as well as discrimination that blocks their access to many human rights, restrictions on health care, including in relation to sexual and reproductive health and rights. Inadequate labor rights and discrimination in access to decent work, including for young women. Undue limits to conscientious objection to military service. These are difficulties met by young people simply by virtue of being young. Young women, LGBTIQ+, young people, young migrants, youth with disabilities, and those in conflict with the law face multiple and additional challenges. In many countries, severe restrictions on civic freedoms also alienate young people from the structures that are supposed to represent them. Many young people have a lack of trust in the ability of existing institutions and leadership to meet their concerns. Protests by young people often express their frustrations with these undue obstacles, and I think we have seen this over the recent year or so, where indeed young people have been at the forefront of protests. I also want to emphasize the worry of many young people, even the despair about the future of our world. Climate change and environmental damage darken their horizons and may sharply constrict their future. It is absolutely essential that young people be given the space to voice these concerns and to lead and participate in shared work to address them. By fully implementing Youth 2030, we can ensure that this space is opened up. We can ensure that pervasive discrimination is countered, and that our people and societies are able to realize their full potential. My office will continue to mainstream youth rights and to assist member states to realize these rights in laws, policies and programs. We know that young people all over the world are the drivers of social change, the spirit of resilience, the genius of innovation, and the strongest seekers of solutions for the future of humanity. But they also have rights today, and a great deal remains to be done to realize them. I look forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. High Commissioner, for your opening statement. And now I have the honor to give the floor to Ms. Jayatma Vikramanayake, Envoy of the Secretary General on Youth.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues and friends, it is my pleasure to participate in this high-level panel on human rights mainstreaming. The topic of this year's discussion, a reflection of 5 years of Youth 2030, is timelier than ever, and I welcome the opportunity to discuss how to further advance the youth agenda across the United Nations system. It is clear that young people face numerous challenges and barriers in exercising their human rights, and it is pertinent that we identify potential next steps on how to address this issue at the UN, including in the Human Rights Council. We need not only to protect, but also to promote the human rights of youth. The establishment of the new UN Youth Office is an important step to strengthen our capacity to step up to this challenge. Please allow me to thank the member states who unanimously adopted the UN General Assembly Resolution 76/306 on the establishment of the UN Youth Office, showing your commitment to youth and embracing meaningful youth engagement in the UN and beyond. Your support and championship of youth issues will continue to be critical and invaluable for the fulfillment of the new office's mandate, including the commitment to provide youth with a nurturing environment for the full realization of their rights, as is stated in the resolution. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, recognizing that young people have a pivotal role to play in achieving sustainable, inclusive and peaceful societies around the world, Youth 2030, the first ever UN Youth Strategy, was launched by the Secretary General in 2018 with a vision to ensure a world in which the human rights of every young person are realized, a world where every young person is empowered to achieve their full potential, and a world that recognizes the agency, resilience, and the positive contributions of young people as agents of change. As of today, we have 130 UN country teams and 51 UN agencies participating in the Youth 2030 implementation, supported by a Youth 2030 Secretariat established in my office to ensure system-wide coordination. Foundations for system-wide implementation are also in place through scorecards for performance measurement and accountability of both UN entities and UN country teams, and these scorecards are fully integrated for a routine reporting of the UN system on the implementation of the strategy. To this date, 2 progress reports have been developed based on these scorecards. Baselines for the implementation of Youth 2030 have also been established. Youth 2030 indicators have been integrated into the Quadrennial Comprehensive Policy Review Monitoring Framework, QCPR 2021-2024, and the first reporting was completed in 2022. Knowledge products, including guidances, toolkits, analytical reports, have been produced and supported by the implementation of the strategy. Finally, we have started addressing some priority system-wide issues like tracking investments in youth, internships in the UN, and working for and youth with disabilities. Youth as essential partners and the current lack of their meaningful participation is further recognized in the Secretary General's call to action on human rights and his report on our common agenda, which is a statement of solidarity with current and future generations. As quoted directly from our common agenda, Young people tell us that our systems do not listen to them meaningfully and that our systems are short-sighted and do not take their concerns seriously. End of quote. To address these concerns and with the view to improve the way that UN deliberative and decision-making processes, such as the ones in the General Assembly, the Economic and Social Council, and the Security Council, engage young people, the Secretary General has tasked me to prepare recommendations in consultation with the world's young people for more meaningful, diverse, and effective youth engagement. I hope these recommendations will be of inspiration to the UN system at large, and I urge the Human Rights Council to concurrently consider not only possible methods of improving, but institutionalizing the participation of young people in its work in a permanent, structured, and meaningful way. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and friends, as laid out in Youth 2030 and reflected in the title of today's panel, it is time to review the implementation of Youth 2030 and update the strategy to make it fit for the present and for the future as needed. It is my hope that the next phase of Youth 2030 implementation will see increased accountability towards young people and for more parts of the United Nations system to engage strategically with the strategy as a tool to mainstream our work with and for youth. One immediate step could be to ensure recurring briefings on the progress of the implementation of the strategy to the Human Rights Council. Furthermore, I encourage member states and representatives of human rights mechanisms to consider answering two key questions when discussing how to better integrate youth throughout their work. First, how to ensure the mainstreaming of youth rights into their existing work in order to address the human rights violations and concerns that specifically affect youth populations. Second, how to guarantee the continuous participation of diverse groups of young people, especially young women, indigenous youth, youth in rural communities, youth with disabilities, LGBTIQ youth, youth without access to technology, and others, to ensure that this mainstreaming process happens together with young people and truly reflects their needs. As I conclude, let me thank partners and donors for your trust and support in the implementation of the United Nations Youth Strategy. I'm looking forward to strengthening our close partnerships and collaboration for the empowerment and meaningful participation of young people, especially those most often left behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Now let me give the floor to the panelists for their initial presentations. I have the honor to give the floor to Ms. Diana Keita of UNFPA. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Mr. High Commissioner, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, esteemed colleagues, young people, Mesdames et Messieurs, I am honored to represent Executive Director Dr. Kanem and join you all today and elaborate on our efforts to put young people's rights and agency at the heart of our work with the support of member states. Upholding human rights, achieving sustainable development, attaining peace and prosperity. If we want to make progress toward this global aspiration, we have to fulfill our commitment to young people. For UNFPA, working with and for young people is in our DNA. We work hand in hand with member states on the importance of achieving demographic dividend. We believe in young people in all their diversity as full-fledged right holders with the right to shape decisions that directly impact their lives and future. We work on the conviction that every young people is entitled to a healthy, safe, and fulfilling life, free from discrimination and violence, investing in their health, including sexual reproductive health and rights, education, empowerment is critical to sustainable development. By partnering with young people, we can drive positive social and economic development in their communities. In 2018, the UN launched the UN Youth Strategy, Youth 2030. It was the response to a demand by youth movement, member states, and other stakeholders for the UN to step up its work with and for young people. 5 years into the implementation of the youth strategy, it continues to gain momentum as evidenced by the strengthened overall attention to youth through all the UN system and the increased integration of youth issues in institutional frameworks and the increasing number of agency-specific and UN system-wide youth-centered programs. UNFPA is proud to be a major contributor to the Youth 2030 agenda, including with our own strategic plan and related adolescent and youth strategy, My Body, My Life, My Word. However, strategy and frameworks remain words on paper if they are not put into action by our team and partner on the ground. Let me therefore share with you some concrete examples of our action in line with the youth strategy. In all the countries we work, we advocate for policy and investment in young people and adolescent girls, particularly their health and quality education, including life skills education, both in and out of school young people. These programs help prevent teenage pregnancies, gender-based violence, and harmful practices, such as female genital mutilation, which often result in loss of schooling and diminished life opportunities. The outcome of this intervention, together with soft skills, contribute to strengthening youth employability and ultimately a successful transition into adulthood. In all our programs, we join forces with youth-led and youth-serving organizations to ensure access to youth-responsive services. Those meaningful intergenerational partnerships help us build community resilience, social cohesion, and the promotion of gender equality. Together with the International Federation of the Red Cross and other 60 members organizations, we have championed the Compact for Young People in Humanitarian Action. The first of the kind addresses humanitarian response efforts, such as in Ukraine, and very recently in the response of the devastating earthquakes which struck Turkey and Syria this month. UNFPA also worked together with Search for Common Ground and youth-led organization UNOI Peace Builders to co-chair the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security. We promote the engagement of youth activists in international human rights processes and mechanisms. Since 2021, we have supported 15 youth-led organizations to raise their concern at the Universal Periodic Review. This type of visible engagement has opened doors to their participation in national processes. And these progresses and advancements are encouraging. But there are still challenges. We are living in a world in crisis, which put pressure on lives of the population we serve. While we continue to be inspired by young people's commitment and mobilization for peace, social justice, climate action, and equality, and their drive for positive change, it is a fact that civic spaces are shrinking. We need to do better to promote, protect, and care for young people's health and well-being, and provide space for them to thrive and drive change they want to see in the world. The Secretary General and our common agenda puts the well-being of the younger generation squarely on the map, and he is calling upon all of us to focus on young people. The establishment of the new UN office marks a significant step forward in our collective effort to ensure that young people have a seat at the table and their voices are heard. Excellencies, Mr. President, young people are getting more seats at the table with member states to discuss and mainstream the youth perspective into human rights policy. We are grateful to all of you for that. But young people also need to be involved in discussion on how normative frameworks can be applied and further developed to provide the specific human rights protection they need. While a youth forum to discuss development policy already exists at the ECOSOC in New York, a similar arrangement for the human rights pillar in Geneva could be considered. As the High Commissioner mentioned this morning in his statement, that he will endeavor, I quote, to promote advances in all human rights without distinction and in every region and across all UN activities, end of quote. We at UNFPA stand right by his side to help him achieve his noble goal in close collaboration with every member state. If we are to achieve a world with 8 billion of us can thrive and prosper, we must ensure cooperation at all levels, be clear on our duty towards the future, in terms of intergenerational and multicultural dialogue and focus on human rights and choices of the youth of the world. As we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the human rights, more than ever, we need to raise the voice of the vulnerable ones among the youth. Their own diversity is critical, as one size does not fit all, to allow them to grow and fulfill their potential as balanced and happy human beings. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Madam. Now we will listen the video statement of Mr. Gilbert Hungbo, DG ILO.
Ladies and gentlemen, today, 282 million youth are not in employment. Theirs is a generation affected like no other by the COVID-19 pandemic, the recent emerging conflicts, and disruptions to global supply chains. Unemployment, inactivity, and insecure work can have long-lasting, scaring effects in career paths and future earnings of youth. Unless these vulnerabilities are addressed and unless the mental well-being of young people is protected, we may be looking at a protracted youth employment crisis. Our efforts, both individually and as partners in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the UN Youth Strategy, must, above all, protect the rights of those who we are serving. I am sure you have all heard the argument that any job is better than no job. But I'm equally sure this audience knows all too well that a low-paid, dangerous, demeaning job can all too easily become a trap for which people never escape. There is plenty of evidence that improving working conditions can go hand in hand with increased productivity. Let's together emphasize the fact that rights are not a luxury that we have to wait for until economies become rich. Rights are a means to an end and an end in themselves. The international labor standards enable an environment in which decent jobs are created and work is performed in conditions of freedom, safety, and dignity. This is crucial to young people today and tomorrow as they navigate increasingly complex labor markets. Young people must be aware of their rights and surrounded by the institutions that protect them. So, let's lead by example and uphold and promote the application of international labor standards. Let's ensure our actions are right-based and strengthen youth voices in key policy-making processes and in social dialogue. And that includes through our support for young people's participation and their voice in trade unions and employers' organizations. I invite you to join hands with the ILO and the UN Global Initiative on Decent Jobs for Youth to make social justice a reality for every young person across the globe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now let me pass the floor to Ms. Ana Luisa Thompson-Flores of UNESCO. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you. Excellencies, 5 years into the UN Youth Strategy, we have many reasons to rejoice about what we have achieved and to reflect on strengthening our actions. Our efforts have been conditioned by an unprecedented pandemic and a worsening state of the world, from the climate crisis to conflicts, divisions, misinformation, and populism, shrinking civic space, and regressions in women's rights. These have a deep impact on young people. To take the example of political participation, people under the age of 30 are rarely found in parliaments, just 2.6% of the global proportion of members of parliament. On the other hand, 69% of people think that more opportunities for younger people to have a say in policy development would make political systems better. The United Nations is delivering on the strategy's priority areas, from education to employment, rights, health, peace building. We have deployed relevant responses together. Let me cite the UNESCO UNOCT project, Prevention of Violent Extremism through Youth Empowerment in Jordan, Libya, Morocco, and Tunisia, or the Education Plus initiative, empowering adolescent girls and young women in sub-Saharan Africa, implemented jointly by UNAIDS, UNESCO, UNFPA, UNICEF, and UN Women. In doing so, we are acting on the conviction that the engagement of young people is essential in and through all of UNESCO's field of action. UNESCO is working with its youth climate networks on new solutions for our planet. This is also what we are doing in our biosphere reserves around the world, where support youth-led initiatives that raise awarenesses of the environment and biodiversity while creating opportunities for local communities. Our World Heritage Youth Forum has, for 25 years now, brought together students and teachers, fostering intercultural learning and exchanges about heritage and heritage conservation. Through our media and information literacy program, we are also working with youth to build their capacities on using new technologies. Yet, more efforts are needed on the strategy's foundational areas, particularly on youth knowledge and engagement to achieve tangible policy impact. We should continue investing in youth research so that young people define their solutions, placing research at the core of policy processes and our actions, as we did for UNESCO's Youth as Researchers program, engaging 10,000 youth worldwide. It resulted in knowledge and recommendations, including on the right to health and participation in public life, which led to concrete member states' commitments. Youth knowledge production for policy processes is also underway through national and regional research initiatives. To support this at UNESCO, we also launched a global youth grant scheme to support youth research and impactful actions. I invite you all to join us. UN entities and member states still need to reinforce capacities to dialogue and work with young people in policies and programming in a free, active, and meaningful way. We have been doing so at UNESCO since 2017 and will soon launch an innovative toolkit for national stakeholders. Only by changing our institutional cultures will we be able to truly place young people at the core of our actions. As we look ahead, we must reinforce tailored approaches to realize the rights of young people, staying away from amalgamations that are blind to diverse identities, needs, and aspirations. We need to connect better with youth in promoting human rights and anti-discrimination. The 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights is an occasion to do so. We must also leverage the opportunities provided by our common agenda, particularly the work on the Declaration for Future Generations and the Summit of the Future, to reverse systemic challenges that affect the rights of present and future generations alike. This must build on existing commitments to preserve the rights of present generations without endangering those of future ones. I thank you.
Thank you, Madam. And finally, I have the honor to give the floor to Ms. Christine Salom. Madam, you have the floor.
Greetings to you. I would like to express my gratitude to share on this platform as a young person. My name is Christine Saloum, and I'm representing a network of youth-led organizations under the umbrella of the International Coordination Meeting of Youth Organization, ICMEO. Through the engagement of young people in various constituencies, we are involved in the implementation of the World Programme of Action for Youth, the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals through the UN Youth Strategy, Youth 2030, Habitat 3, the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 2250, and the implementation of UN System-Wide Action Plan on Youth. Speaking of accountability, I will touch base on the good practices, highlight some challenges, and propose ways to ensure accountability from the youth perspective, being part of the decision makers or the process, and holding leaders accountable for meaningful partnership is a way of driving youth accountability at all levels. Back in 2014, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon stated, "Accountability is essential to assess progress and achieve results. This should happen at the national, regional, and global levels. All actors, including government, the UN system, civil society, and the private sector, should be accountable for honoring their commitment. We need an inclusive, robust, yet flexible accountability framework. Consequently, accountability without support is a form of cruelty." For young people, to be accountable and take responsibility towards society means the one must exercise the right to be part of the decision-making process, to work in partnership with decision makers and boards, and be fully engaged. And acknowledging the importance of youth needs assessment from our knowledge, experiences, and perspective of youth helps in addressing the issue of the highest priority. Most importantly, the recognition of the value of investing in and empowering youth is unavoidable. For instance, the International Federation of the Red Cross, in a document related to community engagement and accountability toolkit, stated that evidence, experience, and common sense show us that when communities play an active role in designing and managing our programs and operations, the outcomes are more effective and more sustainable. In a simple way, like a cake, we may seem to be the cherry on the top, yet we can be the part of the main composition or ingredients. This implies that we are part of the decision-making process, and that requires trusting in the abilities, involvement, and contribution of youth, no matter how little it might seem. At this point, I will share a personal experience. By the end of 2019, the Lebanese situation started to collapse on all levels. The majority of people in Lebanon are unable to secure their social and economic rights amid a deepening economic crisis, with low-income households bearing the brunt. The response of the authorities failed to address everyone's rights to an adequate standard of living. Therefore, youth came forward to help in the situation. A group of young, enthusiastic specialists in the medical, dental, social, and the humanitarian field started an initiative of social and medical support to fill the gap. Moreover, assessing the challenges closely will help the United Nations to understand and build bridges to work in partnership with youth and assist them in actively participating in the development process. As Steve Jobs states, that if you define the problem correctly, you almost have the solution. Therefore, making room to know the challenges is part of the bridge that will lead to partnership and collaboration with the youth to ensure that the United Nations system works effectively and efficiently. As a starting point for positive change, these challenges come in several ways and include the lack of trust, opportunities, common purpose, clear expectations, communication, and collaboration. Even though every challenge is relative to each one of us due to our personal experiences, learnings, and outcomes, young people work to achieve the best result by implementing accountability measures. Youth accountability is part of the community engagement and the overall accountability that we need to achieve the Youth 2030 strategy. It is a way of working that recognizes and values community members as equal partners and the statement of working with and for youth. It makes sure their opinions are heard and used to design and guide the result and goals. For this, good practices of accountability can be viewed as shifting from what can I do to what we can do. With a we, it means inclusion and more opportunities, support, idea sharing, and capacity building. Each person has a unique role to play in making the paradigm shift. Each young person has an experience and an input. In some, meaningful participation is where young people are not considered beneficiaries but active participants and implementing partners. And by saying young people, we mean all kinds of youth. Young women, young people belonging to minority groups, refugees, stateless, and migrants. As per our recommendation, with the support of many youth across the world today, the UN must prioritize the following. Continuously encourage meaningful youth participation to bridge the gap between young people and decision makers, establishing spaces and making them accessible for young people and youth organizations to understand the perspective and challenges of young people, highlight the youth accountability experience and to build stronger systems for decision making. And finally, equal and equitable access to funding by youth organizations to build youth capacities and promote youth rights to ensure meaningful participation across all UN systems. More youth should have the opportunity to participate in the HRC processes and mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed with the first segment of the list of speakers. Let me remind you that all interventions from the floor are limited to 2 minutes, and I do apologize for being strict, and I hope for your understanding. The list of speakers is now closed, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Africa, Ms. Minister Mashego-Dlamini, Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of South Africa. Madam, you have the floor.
Mr. President, in 2018, the 73rd session of the General Assembly took a bold and timely step with the launch of a UN first ever strategy on youth. The Youth 2030 strategy recognizes the need to work with and for the youth of this world. Today, the global youth population is estimated at 1.3 billion. This is the largest generation of young people in history. Developing countries account for the largest proportion of this demographic, with more than 60% of the population of the African continent being under the age of 25. Mr. President, today young people are confronted with multiple of intersecting challenges which have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic that has disproportionately affected the youth and reverse progress made towards the implementation of the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. As a result, the world is experiencing unprecedented level of unemployment, poverty, hunger, inequality, racism, and discrimination. Notwithstanding these challenges, young people are important agents of change. In the past 5 years, we have seen youth-led protests across all regions, fueled by rising unemployment, cost of living, poverty, and inequality. In my own country, the youth played a key role in fight of human dignity, freedom, and democracy against the pernicious apartheid government. The culmination in the June 1976 youth uprising. It is for these reasons that South Africa's National Youth Policy 2020-2030, which was developed in consultation with the young people, is inter alia underpinned by the principle of non-discrimination, social cohesion, diversity, gender responsiveness, and transparency. It is therefore important that young people are included.
I'm very sorry for jumping in, but we have agreed on certain rules and principles, and one of them is 2 minutes